If you're feeling a little tired from the work involved in getting a book deal or an agent and you need some inspiration, this video is for you. I want to talk about some of the really fun stuff about getting published. Now, I know that getting a book deal for your memoir is tough and traditional publishing is a hard industry to break, but if you're getting bogged down by a rejection or in the swampland of writing your book proposal, I think it's important to get excited about some of the reasons you're doing this. So I'm going to share some of the nicest things that you can look forward to when you sign that book deal and you're getting published traditionally. It's very exciting, and it's important to remember how many special things that you have to look forward to. I'm going to tell you about a few of my own favourite things about being published. The first one is books. Publishers are very generous. When I signed the book deal for Love and Other U-Turns, my first travel memoir, every time I met with my publisher, Allen & Unwin, I would come home with an armful of new books. Gosh, they smell nice. I love smelling new books. And Scribe were no different. When we discussed the comparative titles for that memoir, A Letter from Paris, my editor at the time, Julia, tried to source some of those books for me, the ones that they'd published. So they still send me books that they think I'll like to read, if they think that it's a topic that I will relate to, or if I might connect with the author in some way. And it really helps you to foster relationships with other writers, and it's just a really lovely bonus to signing a book deal with a traditional publisher. They have plenty of books and they're very generous. The second thing that you can look forward to is cover art. Now, you probably know this already, but when you sign with a traditional publisher, you don't have an enormous amount of input into the cover. Now, I actually think this is good. I'm not an artist. You might get to meet with the illustrators, or your publishers might invite you to meet and talk about the cover, or you may not. You might get to send some suggestions, or you might not. I didn't have any input on the cover for A Letter from Paris, and when they sent me the first cover mock-up, I was so smitten. It's like you have your very own artist creating the packaging for your product. And delightfully too, if your memoir comes out in a different territory or as a translation, for example, it might get a completely different cover. So Made by Stephanie Land had very different covers in different countries. I think the colour was different in Australia to the US cover, and the UK as well. It's all very nuanced. So you learn a lot about what appeals in different regions and what goes into that. Also, if you're a writer like me, you're not a visual artist, so to have someone else create the cover, to not have to brief them, to source a designer, these people are professionals and they only design book covers. It's a huge relief. So the covers that you see on self-published books vary extremely wildly. Some are really good and others look like a catalogue or a brochure. And the cover art is just one of many reasons I've wanted to be traditionally published. I don't want to be in any way involved in designing my own cover because it's not my expertise. Another thing you have to look forward to is catalogues. I know that sounds strange, but when my first memoir came out, I made sure to get a copy of the print catalogue from Allen & Unwin. It's very, very special seeing your book in there. Your bio, the ISBN, it just feels so real when you see your work listed in a professional publisher's catalogue, which they print for upcoming events, to distribute amongst booksellers, all sorts of things. And Scribe also sent me the catalogue where A Letter from Paris was first listed, and some of the behind the scenes pictures from Frankfurt Book Fair, where they take these catalogues and they pitch your book. You learn quite a lot about the nuances of traditional publishing when you see what goes into putting together a publisher's catalogue as well. It's very exciting. Now, distribution is another exciting thing. What I love about traditional publishing is that you learn so much once you get a book deal. For instance, when I signed with Allen & Unwin for Love and Other U-Turns, my first memoir, my publishers invited me to an event in Melbourne where the distributors met the booksellers, and a few authors were also invited too, upcoming authors with books coming out. This was an incredible opportunity to sound out booksellers about my book, but also to see firsthand how hard distributors work to hand pitch a publisher's catalogue. It's fascinating. And if you self-publish, you do all of the legwork of distribution yourself, and it's an enormous amount of work actually. And it's also why most self-published books never make it into traditional bookshops, just Amazon. Booksellers generally like to get their books from a certain proven stable of publishers and distributors. And there's a lot that happens behind the scenes with this distribution piece that makes a book a success, and it has nothing to do with the writer. This is fascinating to learn. Next is events. Now, if you're anything like me, public speaking is terrifying. And when your book comes out, you'll likely have some signings and events in those first few weeks of publication. More if you're proactive, as I was with my second book, because I realized, gosh, I need to do a lot more than I thought I did. Now, because your presence at these interviews and events is essential to the success of a book, likely your publisher, even if it's a small publisher, they will cover your costs of getting to these events or accompany you to the event, or both. So the publicist might come with you, or the marketing assistant. And they'll also organize a bookseller for the event, so someone else is selling your books. So what this means is your publicist or the bookseller will drive you or pay for you to get a driver, then sit next to you and do the sales transactions as you talk to readers and sign those first copies. If you self-publish, you coordinate all of this on your own. It's quite stressful. They may also pay for you, your publisher may also pay for you to appear at certain events if they're considered key to your book's success. So, with my first memoir, I flew interstate for a big radio interview, and I stayed at a really nice hotel. And that was so fun. But that was about it, because I was pretty green when it came to book publicity and marketing. I didn't realize how proactive I needed to be. Now, I must add a caveat that this publicity support generally only lasts for about a month after publication date. So you really need to maximize it and work proactively with your marketing team. But one of my favorite events from A Letter from Paris was this festival that I organized to appear at with my publisher. It's called the Paris to Provence Festival. I wrote a speech and I created slides, and some friends came down from Sydney. And after the event, we got to sit outside under a tree and drink champagne and eat cheese and just enjoy the festival. So this was just a beautiful thing that I never would have probably gone to if I hadn't been speaking at the event for my publishers. The last piece is longevity and brand. Now, this is a more subtle piece of traditional publishing, but really the reason why it's so special. When your book is traditionally published, it gets stocked in libraries. Your publishers might send it as an entry to awards without you even knowing, as mine was. My first book was shortlisted for a literary award without my even knowing, and until I was shortlisted. That was very exciting. And many of these literary awards and festivals simply don't take self-published submissions or entries. So it's really special. But one of the more moving aspects I found to getting traditionally published, particularly with A Letter from Paris, was a letter I received the week that it came out in bookstores. Because publishers send their upcoming titles and catalogues to key booksellers, my book must have been listed in, I think, the Readings catalogue. I think that's how this person found me. And I received a letter from him, and he knew my father, he knew my uncle, and he'd ordered the book and obviously read it within a day of its release. And it is just the most beautiful letter I have ever received. And he sent it courtesy of my publishers, because obviously he didn't have my address. I would never have known of this man, and he would never have found me had I not been published. He's since sent me other letters from my father, including one of my siblings' birth notices and all sorts of amazing things. So traditional publishing has a further reach in these conventional ways than self-publishing. People find your book in many, many different ways. I treasure this letter from this man because it's almost like a trophy to me of what it takes to get a publishing book deal and why it's so important. I joked to my sister that all I needed to do to find out about my dad was to get a book published because I've since had many other readers contact me with stories about my dad. So there's many other reasons that traditional publishing is an incredible career choice for a writer, but these are just a few of my favorites. So if you would like to know more about writing your memoir to the high standards of traditional publication or achieving your dream of a book deal in the high standards, high stakes world of traditional publishing, I'll link to a few of my resources below where you can find out more about working with me. But I just wanted to share these examples with you to give you some things to get excited about. Now, these are just a smattering. I could talk for half an hour about just one of these things that delights me about traditional publishing. But it's important to remember that it's a tough industry for a reason. There's high standards, but there's also a huge amount of fulfillment that you get from being traditionally published, and you reach such a wider, broader audience than if you just quickly self-publish your memoir. I hope this has been helpful, and I'll see you soon.